So the Center for Racial Healing has a part of it that's called Bishop Barbara Harris Justice Project, which is to honor the first African American woman bishop in the Episcopal Church. And we have several components, including environmental justice. And so we placed the fellowship that we gave to Dr. Thomas under the environmental justice rubric, because this definitely is about the environment. Our communities across this country, communities of color, have always been the victim of so-called progress and renewal, or whatever. Whenever somebody has decided they need our community, they just take it without really understanding the value of those communities, no matter what their economic status happens to be.
I'm Georgianne Thomas, and I'm very, very happy to be sitting in this place, in this space. I had no idea when I was thinking about this project that I would even have the honor of being a fellow, and especially the Bishop Barbara Harris Fellow. This is going to really engage the community. But my feeling was that those steps on Northside Drive had worried me for about 10 years now. Because I remember when there were houses on Northside Drive. I remember a neighborhood called Lightning. And I remember the people there. It was busy there. And then they disappeared. It just went away. And there was the World Congress Center there. And so in my mind of riding around and having life, those steps worried me. To a point where my daughter's in town, and I said, I need to take pictures of the stairs. She's thinking like, what stairs? I said, we're on North Avenue now, we're making a left on Northside Drive. I said, the stairs on Northside Drive. Who knew that taking those pictures would bring us to where we are today? The information that has been gathered, I want the people that are from Atlanta, number one, to know. If they don't know, I want them to cherish the bits of information that they have found out, that I found out for them. Then secondly, I like the people who are coming into Atlanta, visitors at the Visitors Bureau, to say, wow, I didn't know this. Look how much history is here. And then I would like the overall public to just remember that there were warm bodies that were in this space. It may be a monument there now. It may be a stadium there now. It may be empty vacant lots there. But all of that, there's a spirit there. And I'm hoping that this monograph, this documentary will gather the spirit of Atlanta for the new people, for the people who live here, for the ancestors. And they all come together and say, well done.
Georgia as Edwin Thomas, and I'm from the English Avenue area that sometimes incorrectly they call the Bluff.
The Bluff. When I was growing up, I don't remember that section being Bluff. The section was the area that was integrated way back then. My grandmother built the house that I stayed in 1929, and that was on Griffin Street.
The boundaries that I knew of, in a way, would intermerge. English Avenue and Vine City felt like they were all the same because the kids played between the two neighborhoods. But now the boundaries they have set up is anything anything from Joseph E. Boone going north to Bankhead is considered English Avenue.
For as much as they talk about my city being a ghetto, it was a community. My mom owned our house. She bought it in 19. And she said she bought the house for $3,000.
We have been members of Vine City since 1950. Because I'm the oldest and that's the year I was born. And first of all, let's define the boundaries of Vine City, because a lot of people have a misconception of what the boundaries were back in the time period that we were raised. Vine City was bounded on the south side with Hunter Street, which is now known as Martin Luther King Drive. It was bounded with Northside Drive on one side. We had Ashley Street on another side, and we had
Simpson Street.
Simpson. Yeah, Simpson was the other boundary, which was on the north side. That was considered the Vine City community.
To start with Buttermilk Bottom, which is located where the old Civic Center used to be, and the street that we lived on was called Buchanan Street. I never did forget that, Buchanan Street. Piedmont Avenue, where the Civic Center is now, and Buchanan Street was in that area.
I grew up in an area called Summerhill. Summerhill is the second oldest black community in Atlanta.
And I found out later on that Summerhill was a community before black people of Jews.
Okay, it goes from east to west, it goes 7585 all the way to Hill Street. Yeah, because then it goes to the Grant Park. Okay, so to Hill Street, and then from north and south, it goes from, I'm gonna say, I-20. I-20 to, is it Almond Street? Yeah. To Almond Street. So those are the parameters. North and south is from I-20, no, it's from north and south, it's 7585 to Hill Street. And then east and west is I-20 to Armour Street.
They call it Mechanicville because in the old days, in segregated times, when we could not afford to go to the shops that were owned and operated by the white mechanics, and they would always be cheap and everything because in those times there was a lot of us that was educated, knew the rules and regulation, and we were still into Jim Crow era. So most of the black guys who didn't have very many tools, but they had to know how. So they would get one person put up a shop in this section of town, and as he put up, they began to multiply. And they all was mechanics. They had a mechanic shop here, one there, in this section, that section. So inevitably they call it Mechanicsville. That was the reason they called it Mechanicsville. It was probably, I don't know, maybe I'd say the capacity of the people probably about anywhere 2,000 to 3,000 in the area. Because the next biggest black community adjacent to Mechanicsville, we called it Pittsburgh.
There's a little folk tale that says that you don't come into Pittsburgh without being invited, especially if you're coming in to see a girl. If you have permission to come and see it. And that was held to a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times. So those bound Pittsburgh by size, it's a little less than a mile square area. And the geography of that neighborhood is kind of interesting in that there's a railroad track on both sides of it. You may know the tracks in McDaniel and that cross McDaniel. That's the informal boundary of Pittsburgh. It goes a little bit beyond that, but that's an informal boundary that was used by its residents as a marking place for no people to come over unless they were invited. And so, and then the other boundary was, that you probably know about, University Avenue. And University Avenue was also another boundary like that if you were coming into Pittsburgh.
I was born, when I left Grady High School, I was taken to Light. That's where we would live. I think my mom said they had been living there since 49. Her and my dad, Willie Banks, and Gladys, Willie and Gladys. You could stand in my front door and look straight through my house and see the back door. That was it, and it was 3 rooms. So it was a bedroom, living room. So you had to do it like that. And then you had a big room in the middle.
In the middle, that's
right.
And then you had the kitchen.
And then you had the kitchen. That was it.
That was it.
So I grew up in life from birth up.
This is the neighborhood that I grew up in. It's called Mosley Park. And it was mostly a white neighborhood that I didn't know about until I read this book recently by Tom West called White Flight. And it's all about my father wanting to build a house here. And the neighborhood associate, Mosley Park Neighborhood Association came to him and said, "Don't build your house here because we don't want your kind here." And he said, "I'm so sorry about that. I'm going to build my house here." And they said, "Well, if you have to build your house here, turn it so that it faces Chapel Road." Because the street used to be named Hunter Street, and Chapel Road had changed to Mosley Drive. And they said, "Well, just don't let it face Mosley Place, because we don't want it to face Mosley Place." He said, "I'm so sorry. We're going to face Mosley Place."
It's West Side, which we say is the best side. It is the original West Side. The Peachtree Ridge, as the water would flow after a rain, comes west, so we claim the West Side. When I lived on the West Side, there were 4 public housing projects. Atlanta University homes, John Hope homes named after the president of Atlanta University. There was Herndon homes named after a resident of Vine City, Alonzo Herndon, who was Atlanta's first black millionaire. And you had John Egan homes. I think he was a resident over off of Ponce Leon. And you had Techwood homes next to Georgia Tech. The idea and the thinking of being so close to these great oases of education, Atlanta wouldn't miss the boat. And to a great extent, it hasn't missed the boat in education.
My name is Evangelist Sharon Strickland White, and I'm representing Herndon Homes today. Alonzo F. Herndon Homes. It was a community that really had a lot of black pride. It was a community that subscribed to the African adage that it takes a village to raise a child. My father, Grover Strickland, was a part of the war effort, and my mom at the time was a homemaker. And then, of course, I'm the elder of 3 children. I was born in 42, my sister was born in 43, and my brother was born in 45. And needless to say, he never remembered living there. The President of the United States then was, of course, Frank Delano Roosevelt. And, of course, he saw fit to provide housing during the war. And of course, Herndon Homes is a wonderful place at that time because it was a place for families, for the mother, the father, and the children. There was a lot of Black pride. The community was made up of professionals, skilled workers, non-skilled workers.
All of our next door neighbors were Black. Mr. Green, he was the chairman of the board of Atlanta Life. Next door was Mrs. Cooper. She was one of the first Black social workers. And on the corner next to her was Dean McFeeters from Clark College. Wow. And Mrs. McFeeters, she was the first Black public librarian, his wife. They lived on the corner down there. So we were surrounded. Across the street was May Wanda Michael. Her dad worked for the post office, and it was just, it was all Black people.
Most of the people that lived in High Point was like a lot of educators, a lot of, people who was professionals, store owners, and they lived the same way in this area, the homeward that I mentioned called Joyland, and they was pretty upscale as well.
In my particular neighborhood, there were many professional people. We had teachers, we had one doctor, we had a professional jazz group called the Toki Trio. And they would be on TV every Saturday, and we used to make sure that we didn't miss it.
Ours could be called a blue-collar community, then at the same time it could be called a professional community, because I remember teachers in the community. I remember entrepreneurs in the community. But unless you knew a person who was a teacher like Ms. Easley, Mrs. Davies, everybody was the same. Everybody was equal. There were domestics, of course, in the community, and chauffeurs. But people's category or their educational background was never a subject matter. It was, everybody was the same once they got home. Reverend Jones was just Reverend Jones.
I don't remember Dr. and Lloyd in our neighborhood because we were, like you said, a social economic poor. Right? Do you remember the doctor that I met?
No, we didn't have any doctors.
There was no doctors and lawyers in Vine City. The economic status of families were, your mother probably was a maid, your father was probably a blue-collar worker that engaged in either painting or some type of craft, such as plumbing and things of that nature. Like my father worked for the railroad. He worked for an organization called the REA, which was the first before UPS and FedEx.
There were no particular persons on the street who necessarily had college degrees. Most of the adults were just regular people, if you want to call it that, who got up every morning and went to work for whatever the small change was that they made, not the $20 and $30 an hour that they make now.
I mentioned once that I cannot think of a time that my father didn't have 3 jobs to be able to navigate or for family members or what to at least have some access to opportunity. He needed all 3 of those incomes. And he found a way to work with poor people or families that he thought maybe someday could help his family. I didn't understand it at that time, but he would, as a fellow said, my father drugged me. Yeah, he drugged me everywhere he went. He would have me working with him, and I do remember wages at that time. Quite common was $1.50 an hour.
This side was a thriving neighborhood, big neighborhood. One of my fondest recollections, and I didn't come to this until I was an adult, was that
and after the civil rights movement, that I realized that we didn't have to go off the west side to do anything, all right? If we needed doctor, dentist, lawyer, they were all along what was then Hunter Street, now Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. But you could find that on Hunter Street. All the businesses were black owned. Dry cleaners, restaurants, doctors, lawyers, dentists, druggists, as they would call at the time. There were 3 black-owned drugstores on Hunter Street. And so it was a very close community where you could do anything and everything, and you had access to everything you wanted. And in fact, it was in the shadow of downtown. So you just got on the number 3 West Hunter, number 3 West Fair, or the 13 West Hunter, and rode downtown if you wanted to, or you could walk, and you were right at Rich's department store.
Let's not forget the Ashby Theater. The Ashby Theater was like 2 doors from Ashby Street, which is now, what's the name of Ashby Street?
Joseph Lowry.
Joseph Lowry Boulevard. And Martin Luther King. To me, it was Ashby Street, and Martin Luther King was Hunter Street. So a marker, when you tell somebody, give them directions, Hunter and Ashby, the intersection. So the Ashby Theater was 2 doors from Ashby Street. And that was where everybody went on Saturday mornings and stayed till 6 o'clock in the evening, watching all of the movies and cartoons. As Rosa said, Hunter Street was our Leonard Square. You had clothing stores. You even had baseball great Don Clendenin. His father was a member of the old Negro baseball league. And so his father had a bar. But as I think back on it, his bar right there on Hunter Street would be what you would really call a sports bar. And so my father and his peers all frequented. Next door to the Ashby Theater, you had the Young's Barbershop. And that was the meeting place of all the men of the community. Getting their haircuts and watching the baseball game on a little black and white TV with a 13-inch screen on it. And now this is the 50s and the 60s. As Rosa said, you had drugstores. Dr. Amos was most prevalent. It was right in the corner of Ashby and Hunter. And you had Pascal's Restaurant, and then you had Frazier's Restaurant. Well, Frazier was an older lady, Mrs. Frazier, and she had her restaurant set up as such that she had white tablecloths, expensive silverware, and so you had class, you had clothing stores, you had the Dairy Queens and the shops we could get your little sweets and whatnot, and then we even had JT's record shop, and you could go there and buy your 45 records or your 33 albums, and so the West Side was again self-contained area, and everything was right there, up and down High Street.
What I later came to refer to as the irregular economy, which existed within the geopolitical space of the ghetto, which what we call it, was alive and well on Hunter and Ashby.
I'm remembering 4 mom and pop grocery stores that were run and operated by black families in that community. And the community supported them. Because they had to pay the light bills and, well, at the time growing up, wasn't the way we got gas, but they had to pay light bills and things. They had bills and they had cars, you know. But there was the Brinson's grocery store, there was Mr. Robertson's grocery store, There was a lane, they had a little store, it was small compared to Princeton and Robinson. But the community supported, very, very much so. The only time that most people in our community, to my knowledge, was they went to a place called, it just made me think, they called it a colonial store, but everybody, the black community that I know of, called it a Big Star. But it, had all the trappings of a big store, like Kroger, whatever you're hearing now. But and they would off each other rides and things, and they did go out of the community. And I do remember too, even though people had chickens and things then, there was a store across from Big Star, where they had, they would call it the chicken house, I don't remember. The folk would go there and buy their chickens, and they would kill the chickens right there in the store. You just take the chickens and bring it home.
We were within walking distance of everything we needed. We didn't have to buy a lighting for nothing. We had several companies that were located in Lightning, like the Baby Spring Coffee Company, that was right down here, Mirabelle Street, which was a few blocks from Lightning. You had the Anna Cassidy Company, and then you had the Anna Incinerator. Then you had so many little stores that people worked in, and ran and Lightning. Then you had people that had barber shops, we had beauty shops, we had dry cleaners, we had child care, we had elderly care. We had a lot of stuff going on in Lightning. We had one gentleman that had his own little cafe. It was like right on the corner of Mays and Mango Street. And he also ran numbers, so he was one of the hot spots. But he shared. If your family needed money to help your kid go to school or buy some clothes or whatever, he would get it to them. When lending, he would give it to them. And wasn't expecting nothing back. That was the good part about it, because he was making so much money in the neighborhood anyway. So he gave back without any hesitation. Robert D. Jones, that was his name was. Robert D. Jones. Yeah. This short guy ran that cafe right down the corner. And the Pentecostal church was right across. There it was.
That was just common.
It was.
That was just part of being in a community.
Right.
Have you guessed what I mean by the irregular economy yet? The numbers right.
Which they turned it into now.
It's
the lottery.
It's the lottery.
But back then, you had guys like my cousin's father. He owned a cab company. It was Wilson Cab Company. And that was a thriving business, but also out of his cab business, he was one of the big numbers men on the west side. And then you had a numbers kingpin on the east side of town and the south side of town. So all four quadrants had a couple of numbers kingpins. These were the men that were the banks for the lottery money. And you had people that would come in, little old ladies, or you had runners that would go to Miss Louisville's house, and she would give them like 50 cents to play the number for her. And if it hit, she would get maybe, let's see, what was it? $1 would bring you $6 or $60 or something like that. And so the banker was the money man. And so each one of these bankers around the different quadrants, back in the 30s, that same cousin's mother was going to Morris Brown. And Morris Brown had gotten into some financial issues, and they were possibly going to have to shut down. And so she was dating the numbers guy. And so the numbers guy contacted the other numbers guys around the outline areas. And they all got together and took a sack of money up in Mars Grant to the president and said, here, keep this college open. And so they were a mainstay in the community. They would take care of the older people and send some kids to college.
Oh yeah, if you wanted your kid to go to college and you couldn't afford Cato, was the person properly educated, you just go to Cato. And now I'm not talking who I know all this. You'd be asking me right now, what do you know about any of that? Okay, but later on I had to study it. It became, because I taught social welfare policy. So I had to know. But I knew about it then. But the numbers bankers, they provided a valuable service to people who were in need in these areas. All right.
The store that I remember on the corner of James was Chestnut Street at the time before it became James Street Garland. It was called Bass, B-A-S-S Supermarket. And not only could you have to get credit, you know, you could buy food on credit, and you just put it down on the book. And they also would deliver your food. They had a big old bicycle and a big tray, big basket on it, and they would deliver food to your house. My brother, Herman Thompson, his friend Richard King, they used to be pedaling that bike, you know, delivering groceries.
So you can get a lot of stuff in the neighborhood. Now, I don't know how many neighborhoods would have the public library, the post office, Chinese laundry, and all of that within walking distance.
It didn't really go very far outside of the area.
There were some prominent people in the housing project at that time too. And Gladys Knight even lived there.
We had Martin Luther King, who lived on Sunset Avenue, along with Julie Bond's father, Dr. Horace Van Bond. And then down the street lived, from them was sort of like a headquarters for the Up and Rising Snake organization that was spearheaded by Stokely Carmichael, Ralph Brown, John Lewis, and Julian Bond. They were the younger of the, I guess you could say, the pioneer people like the NAACP, and like Martin Luther King was coming on with SCLC, so this was the youthful branch. I guess a forerunner of the Black Panthers and stuff like that. We pretty much know about that. So they all lived there in that area on the same street.
You had the owner of a bus company that lived on the west side. Some of them, you know, before I was here, but I remember they had Dixie Hill Bus Company. When the transit stopped at Ashby Street, you could get a transfer for a nickel, and it would take you to Hunter Hills or Dixie Hills and turn around. That was Cox family. I think they had the funeral home in Auburn as well. You had distinguished photographers on the west side. The Bronner family was on the west side, as well as on Auburn. You had a distinguished prize fighter. That was before my time, of course. He was the Muhammad Ali of his day, by the name of Theodore Flowers, better known as Tiger Flowers. He had a mansion at the corner of Flowers and Joseph Boone, across from Herndon Elementary School. If you can imagine, an African American that had a Rolls Royce in the 20s, living on Simpson, which is now Joseph Boone.
Joseph B. Boone, who was a civil rights leader, and really was his role in the civil rights movement was he helped create Operation Breadbasket. You hear a lot about that out of Chicago with Jesse Jackson, but the original person that started Operation Red Bastard was, as they say, Joe Boone. And Joe Boone also, it was known to put a protest on you. He would put a picket line on you so quick. He helped integrate Mead, which is a paper company, and people didn't want to see Joe Boone coming because they know he'll put a protest against you and a picket line against you quick. And he also used to run a blind center on Sunset, right there close to Substitute, which is now Julie B. Boone.
I think that there were a lot of people that lived in, then they were unsung heroes. Now they are heroes. Okay? Like Martin Luther King lived in Vine City. Maynard Jackson's family had a house on Sunset Avenue, and that's where his family grew up in a house. Julian Bond lived on Sunset Avenue. Judge Horace T. Ward, he lived in Vine City. So I think we had a lot of people who were in higher positions that lived in Vine City, but didn't make a lot of noise about where they lived. They made a lot of noise about what they were assigned to do. My mother was a visionary. She thought of this program about helping maids and doing better for creating a better environment and working conditions for maids. And she created that program, and she worked at it, and she worked at it, and she worked at it, and she was successful.
I finished school with Verna Joy. I finished high school with Lonnie King. I finished with Eldred Bell. So, Margaret Matthews, she was a sports person. So.
At 6 years old, I went outside to play with my tea set because I wanted to have a tea party. Well, while I was outside playing with my tea set, Miss Hall, that lived next door, veering out the window, raised her window and said, "Sharon, what are you doing out there with your mom's good dishes and her tea set?" And I said, "Well, I'm having a tea party." She said, "I'm going to tea party you. You better get in that house and take those dishes and then wash them up before your mom comes. Do you hear me?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." But that's the way the parents did around that way. They would all supervise the children.
Atlanta, coming off of slavery, civil rights, the whole nine yards, this community was built on the village concept, and it's still ongoing.
As I grew up, everybody knew everybody. It was a little village of sort. And we self-controlled each other. In that, you knew the drunks. You knew the person that, he will touch you. You knew the people in the church. You knew it all. You knew who were the teachers. We had teachers in our school. And so it was like, okay, all right. Don't go near this blue block, or don't do this, or that person is a safe person. So it wasn't a thing like you met a stranger. There were no strangers. There wasn't a lot of strangers. The people who lived next door, they lived next door all the time. Because Lila was always there. And Miss Hattie on the corner, Pearly May. So you know all these people. The people way down there, you know people just all over the community.
Well, everybody was neighborly. Best example I can give of neighborliness. There was not a single summer that I cannot remember my mother and the women of our street not caring. The husband would drive the wives to the farmer's market and they would get peaches and apples and green beans and wings. And from one neighbor's house to another, sometime in the street. They would just set up their equipment and all the neighbors would share in the candy. And at the end of the period, which was a month or two or so, everybody would take their fair share and went to their homes. And it was, of course, the children loved to come get the peaches and all the other fruits that were there for us to just eat.
I think it was like a community of brothers and sisters, and that everybody just about knew everybody, particularly in, let's say, within a quarter of a mile square. You didn't know everybody. Like I knew almost all the people across on the side of Mac Bannon Street in which I lived. I knew, and I knew some on the other side, but I knew just about everybody. And everybody, even if they didn't know you, they knew about you.
Well, who is people? That was an order. Who is people? You know. Oh, well, how do you know? Well, I'm in a high school, Daddy, with 3,000 other students. You know, that high school served 5 different public housing projects, and on any given day at Booker T. Washington High School, there were 3,000 students there. Any given day. All right. So you got to know people. And I don't know where his daddy went to school. I don't know. I don't know where daddy is. So, when you talk to him, you might know. Yeah. You know. So.
You knew the families on Grove Street. I knew the whole family. Parents, kids. You knew others that lived, if you had some senior citizens that lived by themselves, you knew them. You knew families on other streets in Summer Hill. You had some relationship with these families as well because we all went to E.P. Johnson Elementary School back then.
I love my elementary school. It's E.P. Johnson Elementary School. The teachers were more like our parents. And they would make sure that we were being obedient and following directions and everything. And if we didn't, you know, they would call our parents.
It was an extremely tight-knit group, and the cooperation between the school and the teachers and the parents, it was like top-notch. Top-notch. They worked together, they got things done, the school needed something. They had fundraisers, they used to have these chitlin dinners, and they'd be selling these things.
She was always in our schools. She was always engaged. Can you imagine having 5 children in school and you know where each person fits in the puzzle? She knew everything. She was at the school, she was engaged in our school activities, our church activities. She made sure that we had what we needed. Along with our dad. Our dad was a major force in our lives too. So as a team, the two of them together, I think they both collaborated to make us who we are. I think they had a purpose in making sure that we had everything we need to be better people. And nothing was wrong. We never thought that we were poor. We never thought that we were any less than anybody else. We never thought anything was wrong with the house. We enjoyed where we were. At school, when the school had field trips and that type of thing, like we would go to the Atlanta Symphony concerts, or if Spelman Glee Club is doing a concert, our teachers would select us and we would go to that concert. And if there were other events going on in the city that our school was associated with, and if we had done our chores and had done well in school, we got the opportunity to go.
The elementary school was Bethune, Mira McLeod, Bethune. It still stands today. Right across from all this stuff they didn't do over in there, it's still standing. And the parking lot was a big field that I told you about. If you ever come down Northside Drive, you'll see Bethune depending on which way you come in on the left. And it's a big driveway in the front of the school. That's the big football field that we used to play on.
Everybody knew each other. amazing. Some of us attended the same school, and when the integration started with the segregation, so some people transferred from Howard High School to Bass High School, which was predominantly white, and unfortunately some of the kids who transferred from Howard to Bass, unfortunately some of them was kept back a grade, so they did not graduate on time because supposedly they were not up to par, their reading wasn't up to par, and so I remember those schools, Bass High School, Murphy High School, all those off Memorial Drive.
English Avenue Elementary School was a white school because English Avenue was known more or less as a white area, more white. And subsequently, when they began to integrate the civil rights movement, there was resistance. The school used to be called Kingsbury Elementary School before it was named English Avenue after Mr. James English, who owned Chattanooga Brick Company, but also was mayor of Atlanta for 2 years. But Miss Kingsbury, who was the principal of the school, when integration, she did not want her name on the school that had black and white children, so she asked her name be taken off. And subsequently, they used the name of Mr. English, who basically was the white landowner and also business owner of Chattanooga Brick Company.
I went to Oglethorpe, which was the same school that my parents had gone to. And Oglethorpe at the time, it was private when they started there, and when they finished there, when I started, it was private. But the public school system built a brand new school behind it, called it Oglethorpe, and hired all the teachers to prevent desegregation, I think. Because they said if we give them a new school, they won't want to come to school with us. So that was method in the madness. But we ended up going there. I have a picture of my parents, the whole school out front on the steps, and my dad got them to take another picture, the same picture, the last before the school closed in 1958. It was really amazing. All my teachers had their PhDs because they couldn't get them. They had, if you got more education, you got more pay. But they could not get the graduate degrees in Georgia because of segregation. So if they wanted something other than a graduate degree from Atlanta University, they had to go out of state, and the state paid for their tuition. So they had PhDs from Columbia University, Chicago, Berkeley, all over the country, all the top schools, right? And it was amazing. So all my teachers were just brilliant in high school. And so I thought everybody was. Because I didn't think I was particularly, I knew my brother was smart, but I didn't think I was particularly smart, but everybody I knew was smart. And so it was really an interesting experience.
So many of our teachers were members of the church and they taught Sunday school, so it was interesting. A closely knitted situation. And there was this little old lady, never forget her name, Annie Wilson. She was blind in one eye, but she would take us to church every Sunday.
If we weren't at school connected, we would be church connected. It was the religious side of it. I mean, you went every Sunday. We had activities. If you was in a child's choir or programs, that children programs they had, you found your connectivities through the church. There was many single parents, single moms who were raising kids during that day. And their kids would sit at the church, and we all collectively connected through the church.
In that little less than square, 1 mile square, they told me that there were 50 churches. I was in the book that I wrote, I was able to find 40, but I talk about 15, 20 in the book. But there was a church at every corner, sometimes in houses, sometimes in the back of businesses, but there were churches everywhere. And so there was you had access and to something that I'm calling our spirituality that without ever being considered to be up there and down there. Now, there certainly if you were going to be harmful to the community, then you were like the devil.
the churches in Summerhill, we had a church almost on every corner, every 2 or 3 corners. And some of the larger churches now started out in Summerhill, which is Allen Temple, Reed Street, which is now Paradise Reed Street,
The largest Pentecostal church, Bethlehem, which is right still on Park Street, Martin King. You had, what was the name of Fisher's old church? It became West Summers. It was West Summers. Yeah, it was West Summers Baptist Church, right? And Dr. Abernathy became pastor of. And there were just churches. You had a church and a liquor store on every corner. All right.
We were greatly influenced by churches, and they often say we had churches on every corner, and our behavior should be a little bit better than it is sometimes. And another church that was outgrown, in terms of their influence, I can recall at least 2 pastors. I had one relative that there were those who, in their leisure, some say they were loitering or whatnot, would be going on the corner, playing some game of chance. Some might call it dice, but anyway. The pastor would pass by, and out of respect, everybody was kneeling down, baby needed a new pair of shoes. You know, nobody want to share what you need, but anyway, they were straight up when the pastor would come out. This tells you that there's a gift. The pastor would reach down and pick up the money that was down that they were taking a chance on, and said, "This goes in the full Sunday report." Now you'd have to call for backup today. The pastor at Higher Ground on Spencer Street, you have the bishop there, Bishop Johnson there. He grew up in that church where you had the minister there that for years. And you have pastors who have been pastoring 25, 30, and 40 years. They obviously had to have a gift. One of the things I do remember in building neighborhoods, a person mentioned that people kind of influenced to live near where there are churches, even though they don't go. They feel that it's safer. Now you had Loren, Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is at the corner of Palmetto, and now Lowry. You had the Bethlehem Church, which was on M.L. King, next to where Pascal's was. And that founder founded a national holiness organization that today people come from all over the country annually, rekindling their spirits to carry out the mission of the church. You had Union Baptist Church, which was on Mason Turner, across from E.R. Carter School, which is now Kips, and across from the Ashford Street Motor Station, which built their mega church, and that was first like a mega church on what is now Joseph Boone and Hightower. And you had Springfield Church on Jones Avenue and Griffin, where it had the uniqueness of a minister having 2 churches and saying that 2 churches in one location. At one location, 2 churches. There was one minister. His name would come to a minutes. And later out of the west side, you had a Dr. W.J. Stafford. He had 4 churches, which I had the opportunity to work with. And out of 4 churches, how do you do that? And right now you have Reverend Timothy Fleming that has a church in Summerhill and a church out on Hamilton. And you have Reverend Jasper Williams that has a church on Baker and one out in Decatur. And at some time, I'm sure that our paths cross and we inspire each other. in the work that was done.
And the other thing about church is where most people went to the church in their neighborhood. Now if you go to a church in our neighborhood, 80% of the people who at that church do not live in the neighborhood. So that's the difference in terms of the church. I mean, everybody went to the same church, so it means that was a common point of spirituality as well.
We went to church, we went to First Congregational Church, which is a downtown church in Cortland and Houston Street. And now it's called Cortland and Dobbs. John Wesley Dobbs. He was Mayor Jackson's grandfather. He was called Mayor of Auburn Avenue because he was such a city-minded person. And he pulled together with my great uncle, who was running the newspaper at the time, in the late 30s and 40s, to get people to register to vote. And had a bipartisan voters league. And it was an amazing time.
At church, we were there on Sunday morning for Sunday school. After Sunday school, we would go across the street and spend 15 cents. We were supposed to put 50 cents in church and spend 15 cents on some candy and then rush right on back to church after Sunday school. And then, of course, you were there for the service, and then after that, you would go home and eat dinner that was cooked the night before, because you remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, so you don't cook all day on Sunday. And then after you had dinner at home, then you would go back to church. And then there was an exercise called the Parade of Flowers and the Tom Thumb Wedding, where the children would participate in the Tom Thumb Wedding, and all kinds of things going on in the church after church. And I think the Baptists call it BTU, but we called ours young people, the YPD, Young People's Department. And so Mother would have us in church on Monday for choir rehearsal, and she was in 2 choirs, so then you got to go to choir rehearsal on Monday, choir rehearsal on Tuesday. Wednesday is prayer meeting, and so we would have to be sitting on the pew swinging our legs and being quiet. And then on Thursday, they would do all kinds of activities at church too. So you were there every day of the week. On Saturdays, we went to church, and the concrete floor of the basement was wonderful because we could go roller skating. So we would go roller skating in the basement of the church as children, and we would also make cookies in the oven at church on Saturdays.
Because we were in contained communities, everything that we did basically was centered around the church and the school.
There was Miss Gay who lived down the block, and they would do inspections every so often, ever so often, and it would be a thing whereby they'd come in and see how clean your apartment would be. And if it did not pass the inspection, then you were evicted. Now, Miss Gay lived down the block, and we all were concerned when we were children, though, because whenever there was a holiday, you would always take her a plate. If it's Thanksgiving, take Miss Gay a plate. If it's Christmas, take Miss Gay some Christmas food. But her place always smelled kind of funny. She had a big garter on her neck. But when it was time for the inspection, my mother and other women in the community would go down, and Mother would always tie up her head when she was trying to clean, and they would clean her place from stem to stern to make sure that she would not be evicted, because she didn't have any children or grandchildren or any family, and nobody wanted her to be evicted. That's the kind of camaraderie we had.
I remember when we were growing up, they used to have a yard of the month, and so it was a push towards you making sure that you took care of what you owned or rented. And even there was no distinction, as you said, between the homeowner, the renter, or the apartments across the street. Because there was respect, and everybody looked, was sort of like a family.
I remember him, he would sweep the grounds, which was dirt. There wasn't any grass.
No grass.
There was no grass. He would sweep the grounds. He would get upset if he saw anything on those grounds. I know that sounds crazy.
Paper or anything like that. Kids coming by and throwing stuff in the yard. He didn't allow that.
He didn't allow it.
No. I know it well too.
I also lived on Little Street. My family was 7 in a 3-room house, including a bathroom.
We thought we were the richest people in the world. I guess because of the family circle, the love and the caring from my parents and from my neighbors. Like I said, the neighbors who looked out. So it was like we had everything that we needed. As the scripture said, but my God shall supply all our needs according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. So we had everything we needed. There was no extravagant stuff. We weren't into, kids wasn't into like, oh, look at the shoes I have. Everything was simple and down to earth.
We lived in a house where people were very frugal. We had everything we needed. We didn't have a whole lot of extra. But my grandmother canned food, and she would share with the neighborhood, canned vegetables and stuff like that. And so we never had to worry about if we were going to eat or we had food or anything like that. Never. You can see we missed too many meals, so we had lots of food to eat, and we would feed other people. And, that was very important to my family to have extra that we could share with somebody else. So.
Me and my brother played sports. I played football and he ran track. That was an activity for us as far as going to school. Now my parents did make a way for us to get track shoes and football cleats. That's what we needed to play. So, but we didn't realize that we was poor, but then again, we had the necessities of these things by our parents.
We looked out for one another. There was not too many times where somebody was hungry and they didn't get fed.
Basically, economics was an issue, but it wasn't an issue that it made a difference between the community being together and wanting everybody to be successful.
What we find is the value and the importance of entertainment. This was escape from the trauma, the challenge of working where you may not have received full respect. And I can relate that to pictures of entertainment place called the Royal Peacock that was on Auburn Avenue. That was an entertainer I wanted to see. And I saved up and I went to see it. That was ready. Buy my ticket. I was at 8 o'clock. They told me the first show don't start until 10:30. First show. And then it's gonna have a second show after midnight. Now the same people who did work and were on their feet 6, 7, 8 hours, and caught the bus, were there, freshened up to go to see the first and second. Now entertainment must have given them some release from the stress and pressure.
First place I saw Stevie Wonder, when he was little Stevie Wonder, he was 12 or 13 years old, was at the Music Inn on Hunter Street. Wow. Now he was doing the song Fingertips. He was when it was first released, and he was at the Music Inn singing Fingertips.
Now, Dixie Hill awarded the residents a very, 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 very social life. We had Sam Carroll's C-Spot, and then my uncle's Joseph's Rock House, the Congo Club, the Chitter Chatter, all of these clubs, and they were not juke joints as such, were within a 2 to 3 block radius of each other. And yet people from the other side of town, talking about Mechanicsville and other things, would come all the way across town to our little clubs. But then there was also, in the summertime, was another, shall we say, activity I don't care for. There was the Robinson Dodgers. And I remember as a boy, seeing these people come from all over Atlanta, whenever you went, on Sundays, parking their cars along Aurora Avenue and walking to the baseball field for the Sunday games. There was this beautiful seeing black people en masse coming out of all of these different places and enjoying the camaraderie of each other at the baseball field. I remember that very much so.
The other thing that sticks out, our father would take our mother out to dinner, and he would take her to B.B. Beeman's. All these are black-owned restaurants, Erasure's, everything that, even the grocery store, everything was owned by our people. It's the gas station. So it's there was no thoughts, especially younger, but as we got in high school, everybody wanted to go, let's go to the Marriott and let's go to the Regency. This is a new experience, like, oh wow. So, but other than that, that was, no one had that desire, like, I want to go to, no one was thinking about Lenox and things like that, or Buckhead. So we stayed within the confines of our community.
Well, we made our own culture because of segregation. Again, we could not go to the Fox Theater unless we went to the Crow's Nest. My mother refused to go, but my father would go because he loved movies, first-run movies. So we'd go to the Fox Theater, and you had to go around the corner on the side of the building, walk up the steps on the outside of the building, get the ticket, and go sit up in the Crow's Nest, which was above the stars. You couldn't even see the stars. I've never been to the Fox Theater lately, but you couldn't see them. You could just see down in the screen. So my dad would take me and my brother to go see movies up there.
The Empire Theater on Georgia Avenue, it was among some of the other businesses. It was due to segregation reasons. We would stop at the main entrance, pay for our feet, and we had to walk around the corner on Cruise Street, go through a back door and walk up some steps, and the black children and people sat upstairs, so only the white people could sit downstairs, you all. That's the way it was when we were little children growing up in summer. That's right.
We also had our own theaters. All the theaters were segregated, so every black community had a theater.
My first job at Pittsburgh. Okay. It was called Harlem Theater.
So when I was growing up, we did get a chance to maybe select students based on most time upon your academic. You might get tickets to go to something at the Fox, but remember the Fox you had to be upstairs, you couldn't be downstairs. And or then at a certain point in our lives, we used to get tickets to what they call the Ashby Theater. And we would get tickets, so on Friday we would go to the movie on maybe a Friday and a Saturday. And that was on Hunter Street, which is Martin Luther King now. And so we would go there, and then for his recreation, by then John F. Kennedy had been built, and John F. Kennedy Middle School was a school where they had a swimming pool and an outdoor recreation area, playground. And so, and a rec center, so you can go in and play bumper pool, or and then they have a summer camp there for you. And so, sometimes I see people now, they say, used to be my summer camp, teacher or something like that. And we would just do the CETA program. They would give us little jobs. If you were 15, 16, 17, you could get a little job. And the kids that come to the program might be up to 13 years old. So you weren't too much older than those kids. And then the other place that we had was Bellwood Boys and Girls Club. And it used to be Bellwood Boys and Girls Club, and then eventually put Bellwood Boys and Girls Club. And so that was another place, and that was directly across from English Avenue School. You just have to cross the street. And it was a safe place where we learned to swim and that type of thing. So we did have some recreational type things and educational things that we could attend.
Recreation area, we only had one park, and that was Washington Park. Everything was at the George Washington Garbage, so we had Washington Park, and that's where we learned how to swim and different things. And that was the only one that we had in the entire city for black people. So we really patronized it pretty much because that's all we had.
I guess we're low maintenance. Technology has entered now. Children are like, oh, they got to have this kind of phone. Oh my goodness. So we enjoy being with each other, playing games, and that was the entertainment. Playing jackstones, playing marbles, entertaining each other.
I think just summertime, playing outside and being with my friends and playmates, it was just so wonderful just to go outside and play. And we'd stay out, and then our parents would call when the streetlights came on and it got dark. And we'd hear mostly Alexa's father call, Sonny, 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 it's time to come home. And he would come home, and we all knew it was time to go home.
My grandmother said, do not allow the sun to catch you on the other side. Meaning there was a tree at the edge of her property line, and when the sun got to the top of the tree, I needed to be on the porch, not walking past the tree. I needed to be on the porch, because then the sun would be dropping down in the west, and so I had to be there. That's what I'm saying. She's let me did a lot of things. But the bestest thing, I think, and I'm saying it like the children say it now, the bestest of the things was Christmas, everyone and everybody got skates. And really, you skated all day long. It may have started as early as 4 a.m. in the morning. You didn't worry about breakfast. You just skated. And there was, Jones Avenue was known as one of the places to be on to skate. The other place that was known was Alexa, because Alexa had a tall hill. And it was the greatest joy to walk up or skate up and then to come down. Because when you were coming down, hey, you are on it. See, you are on it. So I would say the bestest thing would be, the Christmas thing, have the skates, and everybody, and this is when this section, the west section, or university section, came to Jones Avenue or to Election to skate. So everybody ended up knowing somebody.
A family about a block from us, they were the first ones that I knew was on TV that had a TV. And so all the children, when there was time for certain stories, the parents of the children that lived there would let us crowd in and see their TV. And so we'd be looking like a theater. All of us would be sitting on the floor.
My childhood at Summer Hill was very exciting. It gave me opportunities to be very creative. There was a brick wall outside my house, and I used to play in the dirt and make mud pies, and I used to swing on the sign posts. At that time, they were circular. I could swing at night and look up at the stars, and I would sing to the stars, and I felt very safe, That's one of the things I remember about Summer Hill.
And the communities back then were safer, much safer than they are today. Parents felt that their child could walk to the corner store and buy an ice cream or a bag of potato chips. Parents would feel that their child was safe riding their bicycle. We had no crime issues the way it is today in Summer Hill.
You could go and leave the house and not have to worry about anybody breaking in. You could just leave your screen door unlocked. Just pull it to, is what we used to say. I felt secure, I felt safe and protected. And I just know that it was a good place to live.
I felt safe. I never felt unsafe when we were growing up. And that's not to say that there was nothing was going on, that there was no crime, but there was, I would say, honor among thieves. There was you know, about kids and elderly. So people look out for each other.
People would look out for you. So that meant that they're safe. No, whether it was night, midnight or whether or not you could walk the street. You were warned by people not to do that. But most of the time, there was nothing that would happen if you would do that. Now, were there fights? Yes, there was. There were fights. And sometimes some people got hurt. But even when they got hurt, everybody looked at them. And so they might say, Noonan stabbed that boy. Well, but we're going to take care of him. They're going to get him to Grady. Grady was on the hospital that black folks went to at that time. And so that's the kind of community, the kind of attitude that was in the community that I think we kind of lost.
It was so bad in the area that my dad asked one of the first black policemen, his name was Billy McKinney, to meet me at the bus stop when I got off the bus, and then when I got off, I would go back, he would walk me back to the bus stop. We were living in Summer.
There weren't any drugs. As a youth, I never saw any drugs in my entire life. Only that legal stuff. I mean, like stuff, that the kids use now, angel loves, the heroin, marijuana, and etc. and all these different. There was non-existent. First of all, we couldn't afford it anyway. And secondly, it was here in the South, it was unheard of. Because all we knew how to do was work, play, work, play. So pretty much, but we had vices like they had liquor, very little beer because financially they couldn't afford all of that. So, but some of the guys from growing up in the country and so forth, they know how to make whiskey, so that went on a lot, okay? In white communities as well, because then they just really couldn't afford to go to a whiskey store.
You had some people that were, rowdy and did their own thing, but they were still good people. Most of the things that happen day in life happen on the weekends because everybody was working during the week.
We was born and raised up in Vine City, and I love Vine City. Love it today. Or if I didn't, I wouldn't move back. Not so violent in any other neighborhood.
Creating homes, one of the stories I remember, unfortunately, there was a domestic situation that broke out across the street from where we lived, and I never did forget this. I remember this lady having this huge butcher knife trying to stab her husband, and my father walked over and took the knife from her, and it was like, wow, isn't that interesting? So even showing that type of involvement, a lot of people now turn away. That's not my problem. So
Andre Moore, remember that? He got killed. Police killed him back in the 60s, and that caused a race riot in Somerville. But they shot him in the back and said he threw a rock. Now, how you throw a rock and somebody shoot you in the back? I don't know. Nothing was ever done about it. They did, and I need to keep bringing up Andre Moore's name because I don't want anybody to forget that.
I believe, too, that it was because of racial hatred that things started to happen in our self-contained communities. For example, there would be a time when the proprietors and the people who were operating the businesses would be exploited. Whites would come in and do things to just diffuse the economic power. So, in fact, now see, the problem is, though, when we're self-contained like that, even when we rode the bus, we didn't have to worry about going to the back of the bus because there were no whites who lived there, so we could take up the whole bus. Nobody told you to go to the back. But then after a while, when the integration started, then that's when disintegration started, and that's what caused the whole problem there when it came to racial inequality.
And then there was the warehouse that was closely downtown that no one knew about, that the students of AU Center, and black and white, there might have been some students from Georgia Tech, that all collectively got together to formulate strategies how they were gonna boycott Riches, Macy's, Walgreens, and other stores that were discriminatory toward blacks. And I was a part of that.
Yeah, the bus boycott. You remember when they had the bus boycott? That was a bus boycott when we were not supposed to ride the bus.
Right. I was part of that student non-violating committee setup in the sense that I ran the mimeograph machine and ran off all the flyers. Of course, I was 13, so it was back in 1963. But just attending these meetings with my mom, who would go around and these people, Martin Luther King, Grace Hamilton, all these individuals who get together to strategize how they can combat the issues of civil rights in the city of Atlanta.
It's not the same kind of community. The people knew each other then. You had people moved away, and for whatever reason, and with I guess integration, and people had opportunities to move to other parts of the metropolitan area. Some folks have family members that are still there, but it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same at all. Fine city, maybe. You know, I would not have had the opportunities that I have had, and I've had a lot of very good opportunities. Had I not been in Vine City with the people who touched, moved, and inspired me to, you know, try to be the best person I could be.
I had the opportunity to build a house anyway, but I wanted to come back to Vine City, my roots. It was something like a calling. Something kept bringing me back, telling me to come back home. And I did. From what I see today in Vine City, from what I was when I was young, it has grown. The people have changed. The neighbors we used to have, either they deceased or moved away. But Vine City is still Vine City.
It was in what we call transition right now, and what happened is they really got so bad, crack. So you don't have the cultural dynamics of what happened in the society. And crack came here about 1986. It devastated our community. People who were upstanding young ladies ended up getting on crack, and they did things that they, in other words, put it like this, crack is the only drug that separated mother from child. See, even if you was alcohol, you could drink all night long, but the next morning you would say, what the hell are children? Okay? But if you were on crack, you could smoke crack all night, and the next morning what you want is another hit. You may not even ask about your children. So it was crack devastated the black community. And so, cocaine always existed in all communities, white, whatever, and mostly upscale community. But what they introduced into the black community was a cheap way to devastate your life and tear your life down. And when crack came in, it took a devastation on our community, specifically East Avenue and Vine City areas, and all through the city. But see what it is with heroin. Heroin was a drug that maybe made you kind of slow down a little bit. It was like a slow down type drug, I think. But crack was a speed up. Everybody was moving fast, trying to get the next hit, that type of thing. And it devastated the community. People moved out. And as a matter of fact, there was a statement where she, God rest her soul, used to be commissioner, Fulton County Commissioner Emma Darnell, said she was on Bankhead or Bell and Hallway, and she must have made a turn into English Avenue, and she thought she was in a third world country. Houses were vacant. It used to be in English Avenue, it kind of be 4 houses vacant, and people living in them, just living in them, homeless and crack addicted, and then 2, 3 houses standing with people living in it. Every block, blocks and blocks and blocks. And so now it's coming back where, you got all the houses on both sides, maybe you got 3 houses, all of Jones Avenue is vacant. And even then, we pay to make sure they cut the grass at those houses so they don't look like they abandoned, whatever. But she couldn't believe that the neighborhood had deteriorated, but now it's on the way back. But as it's coming back with the spirit of gentrification, because now there are more higher income people moving in. So that means that you can buy a house in English Avenue for $280,000 or more. And I'm like, come on now, it's supposed to be that much for a house over here. And so gentrification is coming, whites are coming, but also upper income blacks are trying to come back. But more whites are coming because they want to be closer to downtown and closer to the inner city. When they did the suburban rush out, they didn't want to rush back in.
Well, Grady Homes is still there. It's still there, alive and well. But although it's so modernized and stuff. So before it's community and what happened to the people, Fourth Ward. There's a little interesting story. I moved away from Fourth Ward in, I guess about maybe 20 years, 15, 20 years. Moved back to Fourth Ward. Moved back, it's interesting. They had this thing called affordable housing made available through the NACA program. I don't know if you're familiar with NACA. That's one of those organizations that assists with down payment, and we bought a house on Howard Street, right around the corner from where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. lived. It's like, wow. And the King Center, all that's right there. The beautiful restaurant, which is gone now. It was a fire. It was never rebuilt. So what happened to it? Where did they go? They never did replace the beautiful restaurant. Howard Street that we lived on, the affordable housing, a number of African American people moved in these houses, these affordable houses, but the affordable houses went from being affordable to insane. The house we lived in on Howard Street, 93 Howard Street, we moved there, I think it was like $128,000. That house sold 2 years ago for $675,000. And the affordable houses, it's supposed to have been affordable, but things shifted. So, well, wait a minute, I thought my rent was going to be this amount. So who lived there? Where did they go? The change of guards, change of times, and what was affordable is now not affordable anymore.
There was less than 1% black or white folks who lived in Pittsburgh. Less than 1%. Maybe I should say it didn't exceed 1%. So I've seen Pittsburgh become declining number of African Americans that live in Pittsburgh now. In fact, even now it's infiltrated by whites and others. And so I've seen them struck. I came back to about 10 years ago officially. And I've seen the struggle of Pittsburgh trying to maintain itself, which is having quite a struggle right now. So I've seen that kind of change. I've seen the increase in crime, and I attribute that to the fact that the neighborhood spirit is not present. And I attribute that also to the fact that, in fact, I just raised the question at the symposium, basically a symposium last week, that my question was, we have all of the intellectuals talking to themselves, so how do we get it to the corner? Nobody's answered that. And I think we have to work on that because they're analyzed our joining each other again. We're disjointed at this point in time.
It appears that it had something to do with urban renewal. The city, probably what they wanted to do with Summerhill. And it destroyed, in my view, it destroyed the true essence of Summerhill. A lot of the things that were in Summerhill when we were kids are no longer there. They tore down great E.P. Johnson Elementary School, tore it down and built some fine looking apartments over there. Georgia Avenue does not look the same anymore. Cheney Stadium, which used to be the stadium for high schoolers to play football. Initially, it was for the white kids, but then it was changed after desegregation, after segregation ended. Then the black children were able to play their high school games at the Cheney Stadium, right there on Georgia Avenue, Conley, Little Street, and Bad Street. Now, it is no longer a stadium. It is some type of recreational facility. I've noticed people run there, walk around. It is not a stadium, but the land is there. The enclosed land for Cheney Stadium has not been changed. It is there. Cheney Stadium, which used to be the stadium for high schoolers to play football. Initially, it was for the white kids, but then it was changed after desegregation. After segregation ended, then the black children were able to play their high school games at the Cheney Stadium, right there on Georgia Avenue, Conley, Little Street, and Bad Street. Now, it is no longer a stadium. It is some type of recreational facility. I've noticed people run there, walk around. It is not a stadium, but the land is there. The enclosed land for Cheney Stadium has not been changed. It is there. The sum of the community, when I ride around Summerhill today, it just appears to be a different flair of Summerhill. I do remember this too, ladies. We had sidewalks. We had to walk in the street. All the streets of Summerhill had nice wide sidewalks, nice wide streets. The street where I grew up on until I was some birth of 17, Little Street, we had all kind of beautiful trees on the street. They have torn down all those beautiful trees. You drive down Little Street right now, all you see is the houses. No shade. Now the sidewalk is still there. Something major happened in Summerhill. There are no grocery stores on Summerhill today as it was when we were growing up. They're in the process of building a public store at the corner of the street where I grew up on until I was some birth of 17, Little Street. We had all kind of beautiful trees on the street. They have torn down all those beautiful trees. You drive down Little Street right now, all you see is the houses. No shade. Now the sidewalk is still there. Something major happened in Summerhill. There are no grocery stores on Summerhill today as it was when we were growing up. They're in the process of building a public store.
Now, as integration actually came to Atlanta in 1961, and when it was officially the all integration in Atlanta and primarily across the whole South. Okay, after they finally got all the details lined out. Well, opportunity arose. You see, places like, just give you some examples. Say we couldn't work at craft food. Now we could. Continental can, now we could. Don't have to worry about standing at attention if we go and take a test for Lockheed or, the post office and so forth and so on. Now, as as integration becomes the merging with us, we begin to dilute groups of black people living together. We begin to spread out, you know, and as the open houses became accessible to us.
Well, I live on the corner of Fraser and Bass. Okay, it's all three corners got 3-story building, 4-story building above my house now. I've been walking on the street the past 40 years since I've been living that house. And all of a sudden now, they're saying I got to take too much parking space. Yeah, so I get the enforcer come out and make sure I got my insurance on my car. But I got a car in the van. They said my grass wasn't cut. They cut my grass. I'm gonna get a chance to go cut it. I mean, it's not above my knees, so what's the problem? I mean, I thought y'all wanted to stay here. I mean, they didn't want senior citizens to stay in the neighborhood. But they forced me to stay in my house.
That's right. Tell me how much your mama paid for her house. Or you paid for
You
her house.
paid $39,000 for the house.
And now they're selling 700,000 condos across the street.
40 years later.
It's kind of like what you see on the Jeffersons. They were moving on up, and they thought to go buy a house on the west side.
Right. Incomes.
Yeah, incomes.
People going to school getting degrees.
Because they could have better housing, access to stores again that they didn't have anymore. And then on the street, Georgia Avenue, where all those beautiful stores were, and things that I talked about, they have buildings that were left. They have refurbished those, built brand new buildings. And it's a whole different population in I was mentioning when I went by and picked him up so we both wouldn't have to drive. You don't see us sitting out there. There are other people sitting out there. They have taken over the neighborhood. You see them walking the dogs with a chain, and I said, boy, these are some dumb dogs, because our dogs used to just run around and come back home when they got ready. These, they have to keep them on a leash and bring them back home. So these dogs are not as smart as our dogs used to be. So.
In the beginning, everybody was on the same page, meaning, why you coming here? But it was so convenient to come there. It was right downtown. It was the perfect place for it, you know? But we didn't look at it that way. That was our home, you know? We didn't want to leave. I don't know people that I knew then. I lost contact and never did get back in touch with them because I don't know where they went. You know, we were good friends, good neighbors, but everybody was scattered. In the beginning, we fought. The churches came together. And they went down to City Hall. And they said, we're not going to let you just come in and destroy us like this. There you go. That's all the death is. You have white people. Prejudice, policemen. That wasn't going to happen. That just wasn't going to happen. But they did go say something about it. Put it off for a little while. But then all the grocery stores started selling. When all the grocery stores started selling, where we going to get food from? The main thing I think was lost was the sense of caring that we had. I didn't have to know you well for me to help you. You follow what I'm saying? And that's how our parents started as well. You didn't have to beg or ask. They saw the need, it was given. And I think that type of spirit was lost when Lightning was destroyed. And I say destroyed because it took us several years for it to really get destroyed. Our church was the last thing standing when they had cleared out everything in Lightning, Mount Gilead Baptist Church. I mean, everything was gone except our church. And the reason why our church is still standing is because they didn't want to accept the little money they was trying to give us. And they didn't give them churches a whole lot of money. They did either. They gave them preachers a lot of money.
I have a friend named Joe Mitchell who lived there until he was 16. And he was telling me Sharon, it changed drastically, because what happened was the government disintegrated the family, because we know that the black man is the priest of his household, and they decided they were not going to allow them to stay there at that cost of that rent. And so the black women still had men to come, and they impregnated the women, you had the children, but then you disintegrated the family. Well, when they tore them down, there was no place for blacks to live. You either had to room in with somebody, and there actually was no affordable housing, which is the same issue today. And I just know that had they allowed them to remain there, then of course it would have probably squandered the opportunity, though, for blacks to move up and out. I like the word excelsior, onward and upward. I think that excelsior happened and people moved out and were able to do well when they did close it. I just know that as black people, we really needed that opportunity in order to have quality homes and quality living so that we could move upward.
You have persons of goodwill and intent that are moving in and have moved in, and then there is just the opposite. Those who are moving in for economic reasons and buying up some resources in the community. I don't think that we will ever see the community that my brothers and sisters and my neighbors knew again in that place. I really don't. And for the reason I think I've just given is that the sense of community that we know and knew. But I suppose that happened all in the United States. I mean, you didn't have to worry about all of those years on my street. There was never a burglary. Never, ever a burglary. And 4 years ago, my house was burglarized. 4 years ago, my neighbor who's been living in that house, I would call her name, but she might not want to be publicized. She's 91 now, but I'm sorry, 93, correction. Went to church as usual on Sunday morning, came home, her house had been burglarized. We just don't think in terms and details of burglaries. But that's pretty prevalent here right now. And that's kind of scary. And yet these were outsiders who had just moved in and teenagers. And the interesting thing is they lived on the street. It's different now because there is a different resident. Where it was a neighborhood, there are those now that are very insistent that it is going to be a hood. The type of pride, the type of persons that once inhabited it, you know, some are still there, but there's not that kind of pride that you see in young people coming up. There is no black ownership anymore in the community. There's one thing we did not worry about during my childhood and those who were older than me. The merchants took pride in giving the young people a chore, if you will, and giving them a quarter or something to keep the floors clean, that kind of thing, such that they would not just running rapid. And now you have outside merchants, and I say outside, I mean outside, who give us a little damn about the resident. And I'm supposing that it's because of the people that have moved into the community So they don't care that, the children can go in there and buy candy and spend 3 or 4 hours, but they don't get anything back, so that no money stays in the community.
I think there's some regentrification going on around here. And people are moving into the neighborhood and redoing the houses. My music teacher used to live up the street, and now a young couple live there. She's getting her PhD from Emory, and her husband is working for some company. And they are very young, but they renovated that house and moved into the neighborhood. She's the secretary of the neighborhood association. He's like the treasurer of this CMPU chief or something like that. So they're quite involved, young black couple. And on the corner of Mrs. McFeeder's house is a young professional who does traveling. He's just marketing for a big company. And he bought that house about 10, 15 years ago. And he's fixed it up and, renovating it. So it's just a lot of in transition stuff, the new generations of folk living in. There was a house that I could not believe up the street off of Mosley Place in Madison that sold for $650,000, and it looked like 2 train cars stacked on top of each other. Nothing architecturally beautiful about it, not just brand new. But a lot of houses are being renovated all up and down the street. So that's a good thing to see, but it's kind of getting pricey now. The people who bought the house that I used to live in, was Billy Aaron's. It's a young white couple that lives in there now. They bought it from someone else. I think it sold twice after we sold it. I think, nothing stays the same ever. Things always change, so we'll just go with that.
Well, I see the changes through gentrification. It's just now starting to touch the west side. Not profoundly yet, but you can see the imprint but the footprint of the gentrification or a new city development, mostly in the downtown corridor and spreading out from the downtown in all directions, but it hasn't quite touched the west side as greatly as some of the areas closer to downtown.
As our parents' generation began to transition, and then I blame a lot of us because when I was teaching at Clark Atlanta, I was sitting there looking one day and I said, why are the young people so different? I know times change, people change, everything changes. Change is good. And the only constant is change. But I started seeing a difference in the way younger people related to their seniors, those that were older than them. And the sense of community and being asked questions in class like, why do we need to know all this black stuff? And it just took my breath away. Why we need to. And I said, and I was talking with one of my aunts who was by that time in her 80s, I think. And she said, I keep telling y'all and you don't hear me. Integration was one of the worst things that ever happened to us. Because you did not, what we did was gave up our way of life in order to assimilate to the ways of another people. These kids don't understand what got them where they are now. They don't understand what it took to get here. So they don't have any respect for it. And I had to really consider what she was telling me. And I do remember that not long before she transitioned, I was writing a paper at the time. I don't remember, no, it wasn't a dissertation, it was an offshoot. And she said, you know what, I'll be so glad when you find whatever you're looking for in that library. but it's right here before you. The answers are here. And she said, you know, you're always talking about the change and why young people act this way or that way. And she said, yeah, they got to do their own thing. But we have given up every sense of community. We have given up the respect. We have given up everything. And she said, we just, you know, back in the 60s when y'all were walking, people were walking around talking about white is right, and if you're black, get back. She said, that's what's operating here. That's what's operating. Look at them. They want to look like somebody that they're not. They want to act like somebody that they're not. And some of us have made it and have forgotten to reach back and pull others with us. So it's on us.